Hi there, everyone. I just wanted to have a quick word before we go ahead with this episode. First thing is first, I would like to send my deepest condolences to the family, friends, and bandmates, of course, of Nisa from the band Sacramento. I've just seen the news. It's very tragic, and I just wanted to send my condolences more than anything. I terribly regret the fact that we were never able to get him on this podcast, because I think that's something that very well could have happened, and there would have been some potential there for it, but it's just something that never happened, and of course now it's unfortunately too late for that. Yeah, I want you to go and listen to their music and reminisce about what he obviously left behind as an artist. And I don't want to dig too much into details there, but one thing that I saw that I really liked was on the band's own official announcement, they made a point about not glorifying suicide, and that's something that I stand quite strongly with, actually. I'm very glad that they said that, and this is something that sometimes, unfortunately, gets a little bit skewed in the context of this genre, and and it takes a degree of maturity to acknowledge something like that, even publicly, but nevertheless, this is a tragedy. So once again, I want to send all of my condolences to everyone out there. And in fact, one more thing that I would like to add there is, if you are someone who is struggling, if you are having thoughts about ending things, then do reach out to someone, okay? Permanent solution to a temporary problem is never the way, okay? Things will always pass, and just speak to someone. Anyone, could be a fucking stranger on the street, could send me a message, or a professional, or whatever. Doesn't matter. Just speak to someone, okay? And I hope that you will see it through. That's all I got to say. And yeah, so with the upcoming episode that we've got here with Alan, this is a fucking special one. It gets deep. It's quite an intense episode, okay? And just want to give you a little bit of a heads up to approach this with open ears, I should say. Open ears, open heart, open eyes. And you may hear some stuff that you'll agree with, and you may hear some stuff that you won't agree with, and that's okay, all right? And you will hear throughout the conversation that perhaps we don't agree on absolutely everything either, but what's important is the pursuit of truth and having discourse. It's one of the main reasons why I keep this podcast going. And this is despite the fact that it costs me time and money. I like doing it because I feel like it's a service to at least have a conversation of some sorts, okay? We may be experts in some fields, but we won't be experts in some other fields, but we'll have opinions about all of those, and that's okay? We are citizens of this world, and we like to engage in things that affect us, basically. Okay, so a lot of those kind of topics will end up coming up on this episode, so just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up, and if you find that it's a little bit too doom and gloom at the end there for you, go and, I don't know, do some meditation or something. You might feel better. But anyway, thank you for tuning in, and please enjoy the episode. Welcome to Iblis Manifestations. Okay, Alan, my man, welcome to Iblis Manifestations. Very happy to be doing this round 2 of the conversation with yourself. How the hell are you doing?
I'm all right, yeah, not too bad. I've just managed to get through about 80 minutes of a football match and don't have any new fresh injuries, so I don't feel too bad.
That's pretty good, man. Do you do that quite often?
When my body allows me, like 3 times a week, well, I'll usually do it at least twice. I used to do it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But then, that was then slowly but surely you can't do that, as many times a week, you'll just get injured. And so this year has been just, I think, a sort of culmination of years of doing that. So I have lots of bits falling apart, But today, not so bad. So, well, let's celebrate with a beer and a chat to Iblis Manifestations. There you go.
Hell yeah, man. Let's do it. No, I'm very happy to have you here. There's quite a few things I want to talk to you, man. I think people can probably already expect that if they've heard our conversation on Agitators Anonymous, which, by the way, if you're confused, if you're a listener and you're confused by me saying the second round of conversation, so Alan, of course, this is your first time on Iblis Manifestations, but we did already just have a conversation on your wonderful channel quite recently, and it was a great chat. I think we had a pretty good response for that one.
Yeah, we got a good response to that one. And then pretty much almost within a couple of days, the war, the conflagration, which everyone thought was the end of the world, just sort of died down and disappeared. So I think we've probably got a lot to do with that. I think maybe it was something to do with our conversation and they just went, okay, enough. The guys have sorted it out,
It's like one of those, when the blue-haired girls, post a meme about wars, and then all the governments are like, okay guys, she said it now, we gotta stop now,
Yeah, that's exactly what we are. We're the what do they say, the woke right? I don't know, we certainly don't have the opportunity to have dyed blue hair anymore, so that's true.
That's true. Yeah, I guess we're in the same boat for that one. But no, it was a really good chat, and
allegedly.
Yes, depends where you're looking.
Yeah.
But but here's the thing. I think that obviously, so just perhaps a quick recap, we were just talking about things there, and I think that, one thing that kind of came out of that whole situation that I kind of found a little bit frustrating, and I would have thought people would be able to maybe just have a better scope of things by this point, is, again, as always, the lack of gray areas.
Sure.
I think that was something that just really seemed to be missing from the conversation. It's either that, either this side is evil, this side is bad, or this side is evil, this side is bad. And it was just like, I don't know, man. There's a bit of nuance that I always feel like is missing from these things, and it was quite funny, actually, because I came out and said that, Iran's situation needs to be resolved from within, which has always been my stance, by the way, sure. That literally I have been saying the same thing for years and years and years, many of interviews, many podcast episodes, and yet people still came and misinterpreted that, which I guess shouldn't be a surprise, but people were still saying that, that you're basically promoting for your country getting invaded. It's like, that's not what I'm saying. It's literally the opposite of what I'm trying to say here. But yeah, I think it's we live in this time that everything and everyone are just so crazily divided, and yes, there are certain black and white truths within things, but I don't know, man. I just feel like so many people still missed the mark, even with the short amount of time that we dealt with this. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, that's going to come out good in a podcast. Yeah, I mean, it's we're living in an age where, I always try and pitch a lot of things into that gray area, and partly because I find that it obviously irritates people, and I find great enjoyment in that. But the fact that it's people just want the headline, the headline stuff to just digest, and the idea that you might have. Like, I'm always thinking about the 20 or 30 reasons between the two extremes. I'm not really interested in the two extremes. And it's why often sometimes people on either side of the extremes will accuse you of, fence sitting or something like that. But what you are very often is evaluating again, like you say, that region in the gray area. And, people are just looking for a simple, straight and obvious headline. It was very unusual that this particular confrontation, what happened in Iran, it literally went in and out of the news in, what was it? It was 11 days and it's almost completely forgotten about.
I mean, 12 days, I think it was, but nevertheless, that's crazy.
Crazy. And we never really saw what was the damage to Tehran. Did these bunker busters actually, did they interrupt the nuclear weapons process? It's just gone. It's just, the whole thing is gone from the news cycle. People wanted to, there was obviously, you've got the ongoing conflict in Gaza. Epstein, files were literally just around the corner. And what was potentially at one stage being trumpeted as the start of World War III, within 2 weeks, just seemed to be gone. And it's kind of incredible, really, because that was the reasons when it started. I thought, that I had to talk to you, and we had to sort of, I wanted to speak to an Iranian about what was going on, and like I said, within 12 days, people were on to the Epstein files, whatever they were on to. And the media certainly, or something, that hidden hand moving behind the scenes, had decided to push this off the radar. Nothing more to see here. I don't know. It's pretty confusing.
I agree with you there. I think that, I can tell you, we can look at the simple facts of it, and I can definitely talk to you about the facts of what things looked like in Iran, for Iranian people, so, there's a couple of things there that were kind of very strange to me about the whole situation, okay? So, and again, you never know with these things, it's actually difficult to have an opinion on them, even though I know exactly where my stance is on the Islamic Republic, okay? Yeah. I'm, for the record, I think everyone knows this by now, I am vehemently opposed to the Islamic Republic and their policies and just what they stand for and what they've done to the country of Iran.
Yeah.
And the simple fact that they turn around and say Iran doesn't matter, Islam matters, my opinion is like it couldn't be more so the opposite of that sentiment if I tried. So that's where I stand on this particular matter. But what was very strange is that on one hand, there's this sort of calling from the West for Iranian people to basically take control of their own country, which is, there's many things to be said about that. But then what's strange is someone like Trump coming out and saying, everyone evacuate Tehran now. And it's not going to be a safe place to be in. And then, whether that was done intentionally or whether that was like a genuine cause for concern, I doubt it was the latter. When you see something like that, it's like, well, if you actually want people to have an uprising, you don't do that by basically turning the capital city into a barren desert where there's going to be no one there who actually feels safe enough to go into the streets, So again, these things always feel like there's some kind of a game, the same way that I already told you this, I feel like even some of the Masa Amini stuff that happened, even though I do feel strongly about that movement at the time, looking back at it again, it feels like it was just something done purely as a way of gaining leverage and purely just a piece of the puzzle behind the scenes negotiations. That's all that looks like to me now. And this time, it doesn't feel like it's too far off, because it doesn't feel like a lot has changed, but maybe it hasn't. We're just yet to see it.
I mean, it's it's almost, I'm not going to say it's almost impossible to know, but it's just trying to find your way to the bottom of any of these situations, look at what's happening in Gaza and Palestine and Israel and stuff, and trying to get to the bottom of which piece of information and which photo. But this should be nothing new to anybody, really. Anybody who is surprised at the idea that narratives are manipulated by state and media for whatever ends. I mean, this is just naive, But yeah, that 12 days or whatever was very strange, and now we don't hear very much about it at all,
Yeah. We don't, like, it's pretty much disappeared, you know. I mean, I was a little bit concerned at the involvement of the US, because I was like, okay, this could potentially really fucking escalate now.
Well,
And yeah,
it felt like to me that just like the Israeli strikes in Syria, which seemed a bit opportunistic when the regime fell in Syria, they took I think the opportunity of that chaos to strike at it seemed to be in Damascus, to strike at certain military installations in Damascus. It seemed to me that the Iranian declaration at least took the Trump administration a little bit by surprise. That they kind of locked in step after a moment, but it felt like this was not quite discussed or sanctioned or whatever. And then that added to the chaotic moment. That's at least how it seemed to me. I mean, what the fuck do I know? But that's just what it sort of trying to disseminate or decipher some of the messaging. It seemed to me that this was a not a non-sanctioned or non-discussed action,
Yeah, for sure. You know, this is perhaps a little bit just sort of like above the discussion, you know, if you like kind of want to take yourself out of it. But I'm finding
for everything.
It is, it for sure is, you know, because, you know, I think it's important to be analytical of things, you know, even if you're,
being emotional and tribal is the enemy of logic, really, isn't it? And that's what I keep trying. I mean, I get into so many arguments with so many people and say the same thing, which is, are you protesting the protesters, or are you listening to the subject and the message of what they're protesting about? And nobody really wants to do that. They want to protest the protesters because they're, in classic divide and conquer sense, they're in their tribe, they're virtue signaling to whichever part of their tribe there is. So I'm always trying to argue, first of all, if you're willing to have an honest conversation, let's try and smash your emotional attachment to what all these things are. Let's try and reduce that to zero. What is the cold, hard, stark logic of the situation? And let's try and get to that. And if you're willing to, shelve your tribalism to get to that point, but most people aren't willing to do that because it's an uncomfortable sensation to try and go to them, like say, at the moment, everybody's going crazy about, the migrant crisis or migration centers and all this kind of stuff. And to try and get somebody from either side to listen to the other's concerns is almost impossible because they've been, poked and prodded along by media and government, in classic divide and conquer status, just like we saw with, COVID or lockdown or whatever. And while they do that, they can just get along with the business of, power and economics, and trying to get people to just sort of shelve their, how it makes them feel is impossible. That was a completely random non sequitur to.
No, but it's a good point. Actually, you say that. I think that's an important sort of way of cleaning the slate, just so we know exactly where we stand on it. And that's the basis in which we're going to be going forward with. Hi there, everyone. Just a quick moment of your time. This is to let you know that my band TRIVAX will be performing all across Europe come this November and December. We are going to be going on tour to support Absu joining forces with Zemail to do the 30-year anniversary of the Son of Tifereth album. And we will also be joined by Ancient. So this is quite a legendary lineup, as you can already understand, and it's an honor for us to be a part of it. District 19 are doing the courtesy of organizing this run, and we're going to be playing a lot of different places. We're going to be doing quite a number of shows in Germany. We will be playing in Italy, in Belgium, Netherlands, France, Austria, Switzerland, and that includes Eindhoven Metal Meeting, Brain Crusher from Hell in Germany, and Unholy Congregation in Belgium. And it's going to be a blast. We're very much looking forward to it. And of course, we're going to be playing in Poland as well, which will be TRIVAX's first time. This is going to be a very special run, and we are going to be supporting our album, The Great Satan, which came out via Osmos Productions on the 30th of May earlier this year. So you can expect to hear a lot of those songs, and you can also expect to see us at the merch table. So please, if you're a fan of the podcast, feel free to come along and say hello at the merch table. I will be around, and so will the rest rest of TRIVAX. And we look forward to seeing you all in the flesh. There will be a number of other shows that TRIVAX are also doing outside of the tour. So make sure to keep an eye out on those as well. And of course, if you do also wish to support TRIVAX, you can visit our Bandcamp page. We've got very limited number of copies of The Great Satan available on there. If you go and check out and your format of choice is currently sold out, you can also get your copies directly from Osmos Productions. And with that said, thank you for your support and enjoy the rest of the podcast. And when you were saying that, it actually made me remember something, and one thing that I've been thinking about recently. I don't know what your thoughts about this. So you mentioned about the Gaza situation. I actually feel like getting someone like Greta Thunberg to support Palestine is pure anti-Palestine PR, because she's such a despicable and dislikable human being, and then is doing those kind of stunts, that's actually, that if they are to have a cause, that actually goes against it, which is it's a little bit of the whole, I think it's like the classic coup d'etat maneuver, but in like a more of a PR sense, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's something very classical or very historically literate or something about the figure of Greta Thunberg, the sort of Joan of Arc avatar. The idea that a child comes and lectures the adults. It's very, very strange. And I think, her parents were famous, her mother was famous. One was a marketing PR representative, I think. And it's clear that she was a creation of sorts, who gained a huge following among children. And as we live in a society that, is sort of infantilistic society that prizes, that allows adults to behave like children and, tells children to make adult decisions. It was a very, it's almost like something out of a novel or something, like a medieval novel, that this child comes to lecture the adults. But the optics were so perfect. For whoever was our marketing team did this very cleverly. Her going into the UN to lecture everybody. No politician in Europe or the West wants to be seen berating a child. So they'll have to sit there and listen. So whoever was, I suppose we can dig into who probably funded her PSYOP or who created her. Certainly wasn't an organically manufactured, situation. But no politician, probably with the exception of Trump, would want the optics of answering back to a child, and so in that sense, she's perfect. But she's I think she's out, she's outserved her welcome or something for some of those people. Now she's on a boat trying to go to, Gaza and then pretending to be arrested. And again, it's it's just very clever marketing on behalf of somebody or other.
That pretending to be arrested part is rather important. No, actually, you know what? I take that back. How dare you, Alan? How dare you?
Well, the other thing is that didn't she? Look, it's again, we're two middle-aged men complaining about the actions of a child who's clearly being used, who's clearly being manipulated in a situation, and you do have to feel, you do have to have some. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but you do have to have some empathy or compassion with the situation that she's clearly being used and maybe doesn't have the mental fortitude to understand that position. I don't know. But at the same time, she also said, was it 5 years ago, that the world was going to end in 4 years? And if you remember when you were a teenager, this is something that's very dangerous. Is that young people now get their information about history, about culture, about politics from other young people, because that's what TikTok does, for example.
On TikTok, exactly.
So 11-year-olds get their information about the world from other 11-year-olds, which totally, makes a mockery of the education process. You know what I mean? Like, you don't read books by adults, you learn. So kids were learning their eco-environmental politics from Greta Thunberg, who clearly was a marketing and media creation. And she says, well, I think the world's got 4 more years. I mean, if you're 11, you think, fuck, we're going to be dead by the time I'm 15. And what a despicable thing to put in the heads of children, but it makes them malleable and amenable to the idea, I think, as moving forward, that they should give up some of their rights or liberties for the sake of whatever, political, environmental, whatever you want to call it, lockdown process might be coming down the line, because they've been already told that by this Joan of Arc figure that there's a greater sacrifice to be made. So it's like, before the main barrage is there, the softening of the ground for the troops, to just flounder in the mud. To me, that's what it was. It was a very clever marketing psyop, designed to soften the ground, to soften young people's resistance to, to positions, to sort of positions of authority masquerading as safety, or whatever you want to say. Of course, there are people who just go, Alan, for fuck's sake, come on. She's just a girl with a Twitter account. That could also be true. But, it's far less fun to think about it like that, isn't it?
Well, it is far less fun, and also the reality is that it is simply too perfect for it to just be with a girl with a Twitter account. Let's not kid ourselves.
No,
and the fact of the matter is, and I actually do agree with you when you say that you gotta have compassion in these kind of situations. It's hard. It's really fucking hard. The kind of shit that people have to put up with on a day-to-day basis.
Well, clearly with Greta Thunberg, she's somewhere on some sort of autistic scale or something. And she was a kid, and it's clear that she has been manipulated, I think, by somebody, or other. I mean, look, it's not the first time, but it was unusual to watch a child lecture the United Nations or the EU, the headquarters, and lecture politicians. They all just sit there and go, okay. But,
and then you get someone like Arnold, who just like clapping for her and doing like total Arnold Schwarzenegger doing total endorsement, and he's someone who I think has definitely shown his true colors in the last several years. We can talk about him.
Arnold's lockdown outburst. People shouldn't forget. You shouldn't forget those things.
I don't think they should. They should. I funny. I wasn't planning on talking about this at all, but this is.
We can talk about football. We can talk about something else if you want.
No. It's this is the nature of the beast. I like it, man. Because they're important things. I was actually considering even making a video about Arnold, but tell you what, I'll talk about what I was thinking here, because you want to talk about a guy who was and is still to a degree the epitome of the male role model, someone who came from nothing, and made everything with that, using the American dream, but also that in conjunction with his own sheer hard work and dedication, charisma, personality, and all of the things, that, like all of us as kids, especially I think of our generation, I think a lot of us looked up to Arnold as, wow, look at this guy, how fucking cool is he? He not only becomes the best at bodybuilding, but he does what's even more impossible, which is to become the best known actor at the time with that ridiculous accent and the name. That's actually even more impressive than his bodybuilding career, you could say. And then gets into politics and everything else that he does. And those are all things that, you can learn from him, and you can apply that discipline and mindset to your own life. But unfortunately, his true colors came out in the, I want to say, in the last 5, 6, 7 years of his life, okay? First of all, he does that Game Changer documentary, okay?
I don't know this.
Yeah, so this was Netflix, was it 2019 this came out, where they're basically promoting plant-based diet and stuff like that. And you know what? And this was very much a biased documentary, but I'm not even against people who have a plant-based diet or anything like that. I have many friends of mine. I've tried it myself. That's not the issue here. The issue is the fact that Arnold, like during his like sort of press run of the same documentary, would keep pushing those materials, and then if someone asked him, okay, so what's your favorite food, he'd be like, oh, just steak and eggs, of course, and then that kind of hypocrisy, that you went to a country like America to use its freedoms to become a successful person, and you surely had a fucking good run of it, and now you're the same person who turns around and says, screw your freedoms. The very thing that made you the person that you are, you're going to turn on that, and you're literally going to turn around around and sell out every other fucking person on earth who looked up to you just for your own gains. Then you're gonna go and fucking rub shoulders with all these dickheads behind the scenes, and you know, this is the sort of thing we shouldn't forget about. That, you know, you go and rub shoulders with the likes of Tony Blair, and then on one hand do a Jocko podcast, so you kind of still appeal to the male, more maybe like more right guys, but then on the other hand you still go and do all that fucking nonsense, you know. And I think that he should always, you know, people can learn from you, people can look up to you, but in the case of Schwarzenegger, he will always be remembered as a fucking fraud and the genuine sellout, which is sad for me to say, by the way. Okay?
I think that, I mean, there's a couple of things I think about that. I think that he can quite easily be, let's say this, for 50 years, he could have been relatively consistent. And for 5 years, at the age of 70 odd, lost his way. It's if you've made a couple of years of decisions later in your life, especially around lockdown and COVID. And of course, I agree with you, you know, as somebody who champions liberty, I mean, that should have been somewhere in his cognizance of the situation, but also he was a 70-something-year-old man. I agree with you, you know, rubbing shoulders with Tony Blair and all those people. I don't think Arnold was ever particularly political, but it doesn't negate perhaps positive messages he put out in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It's like a band who make, you know, a killer first 2 or 3 albums, and by album 6 you're bored. So it doesn't make things he said, you know, I don't think it completely negates them, but I do see what you mean. Strange enough for me, growing up, I mean, I never watched any of those kind of movies. I never saw Rambo till I was like 30. I was completely, and it's almost completely contrary to almost all my other metal friends growing up. I never was interested in action movies. I was never interested in horror, zombie movies, Arnold movies. Honestly, it sounds weird, but I was a really bookish, nerdish teenager who much preferred reading sort of Victorian novels or history books or really odd movies, Jim Jarmusch. And I had no interest in like, there's still Schwarzenegger movies that I've never seen. Like, you know, I would watch Total Recall, but that's because it was based on a book by Philip K. Dick, which I liked. I never just
great film, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I've only watched Total Recall about a month ago on a plane, and I'd forgotten how outrageously camp it is. It's just insane because it's made by, what's his name? I mean, the guy who made. Oh, I'm not a movie guy. Like
James Cameron? Did he?
No,
James?
No. I'll think of it in a minute. Like I used to do a covers band with the guys from Gamma Bomb, and they would speak to each other in quotes from like 80s movies, you know, like Romancing the Stone and this and that. And I'd just be like, I have no clue. I'm not sure that I've even seen all the Indiana Jones movies or something. So I had a quite strange, you know, teenage years. None of those things resonated with me. So I don't have any particular attachment to the, let's say the avatar of Arnold Schwarzenegger from the 1980s or 90s, nor did I find him a role model or particularly inspiring. Although I did enjoy watching what's the famous documentary from the early 80s about the bodybuilding competition. That's pretty
Pumping Iron.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Absolutely, man. Fucking hell. Yeah, I watched that when I was first even getting into weightlifting and trying to learn how to do this stuff.
Starship Troopers. The guy who made that is the guy who made Total Recall.
Oh, yeah. Wasn't it like a Dutch guy?
Yeah, he's a Dutch name. Look it up there on your fancy computer.
I'm looking it up. Paul Verhoeven. Yeah, there we go.
And there's so much, clearly so much cocaine that's gone into the making and the writing of those.
It's funny you say that about
to be in the writer's room, you know.
100%. No, it's funny you say that about Total Recall. I remember thinking exactly the same thing when I watched it more recently. Because the thing is, it does look outdated as fuck now.
I think it's deliberately done like that as a homage to some of the sort of Star Trek kind of stuff. It's got a very sort of camp kind of quality to it, you know.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, just going back to it, like I agree with you. So that's what I was trying to say in the case of Arnold. You can you can appreciate someone for the qualities that they've had to offer. I think the example you made of like bands that release like a good album, but then later turn shit, that's totally true. I think that you can still even look at where he is now and understand that, yeah, by being a certain way, you can go very far in life. What he says about discipline and dedication and all of that are 100% true. I just think that the person that he is now, at its core, is perhaps who he's always been, who's someone who's looked out for his own best interests and has been willing to sell out others. I think that should, I think that in a way, so this is where I'm saying, that defines who he was. But these are separate things. That's not to then take away from what you as a person can learn from the guy. This is kind of one of those things. I guess, a lot of people in today's world might have the same conversation about Varg, for example, but maybe like in an inverse kind of a trajectory.
In a microcosm, they could have the same conversation about myself and yourself right here, right now. I mean, I'll give you a good example. Like, say, for example, say Sam Harris. Sam Harris,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Public intellectual, blah, 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 whatever. I thought he got COVID and lockdown very, very wrong. But that doesn't negate very astute things he's been saying about Islam or other things for years, And as soon as he fell on one particular side, obviously, being, on Israel and Palestine, he has now an unpopular opinion. The idea that, a public intellectual or an author or somebody who's influential, that you have to kind of agree with every single position they take, I think it's a very modern symptom. I think that it appeals to maybe some sort of innate tribal nature, even as so much as we may try to rid ourselves of it. And for me, I just thought, well, I would argue this with friends, who'd be like, fucking Sam Harris, this, that, the other. I go, well, okay, we can disagree with him on this thing, but that doesn't make the fact that him and the other, four horsemen or whatever, those sort of atheists of that early atheistic movement, who were quite important in culture, or his observations about, Islam and militant Islam and jihadism, in a very, he was very an important voice amongst, I like with Ayaan Hirsi Ali or whoever else.
Sure.
I would say to my friends, well, there's a body of work there that I think is very important. This particular thing, okay, but that doesn't negate. It's not a reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. So, I wouldn't put Arnold's obviously not a public intellectual, but he's an inspirational, influential figure. I also think that the standards by which you're measured at as a young man, a middle-aged man, and then an old man, as you're closing in on the last few chapters, are a little bit different, and plenty of very clever, very learned people who are hanging around about between 60 and 75 and 80. Like, look at well, I'll think about it in a minute. What's his name? Noam Chomsky. Look where Noam Chomsky went at the end during COVID. I mean, clearly it's like, dude, can someone visit this guy and take his Zoom camera off him and just give him a good meal and hang out with him and have a glass of wine and just go, dude, stay off the, you know what I mean? Like, say, off the top of my head, Sinead O'Connor. You know Sinead O'Connor.
I do know Sinead O'Connor.
She has an up and down relationship with Irish people. But she was releasing crazy videos during COVID, and clearly it was just like, so can someone just knock on her door and go, Sinead, calm the fuck down. But they didn't, and she fucking died. And there's plenty of people, I think, who just, and I'm trying to be charitable here, because even though as somebody
I could see that. Yeah, you're being a lot more charitable than I am.
Yeah, I think it's almost like a process of reconciliation with a very extreme moment like lockdown. It's not like I've forgotten, or for people who came out and went, "You must forget your liberties" and blah blah blah, whatever the Arnold bullshit. It's not about forgetting it. It's about the fact that I think that everything. I think this was a Vince McMahon quote, which is kind of says a lot about him, Again, to be honest, like my cousin used to watch wrestling when we were teenagers in the 80s, and I just mocked him relentlessly for it. Even when we were 14 or 15, I was just like, what the fuck are you watching this shit for? It's like I was sort of born old. This sounds ridiculous. As a teenager, I became way more infantile and stupid, or whatever. When in my 30s, or way more, I regressed completely from the mean. But at 16, 17, I was a sort of relentlessly nerdy, serious, bookish kid. I was just like, wrestling, what are you on about? So give me this Vince McMahon quote. I want to hear it.
Well, I like it.
Is that the guy who was shitting on people's heads?
Yeah, he just shat in one girl's hair, and he was also naming dildos based on their color, based on the race of the wrestlers that he had signed throughout the years.
Well, I won't discount his quote then. I'll be charitable.
No, that whole thing is fucked. I recommend people to read it, but he's again another person, who's a totally crazy cunt, but again, someone who you can definitely learn a lot of things from. And one of the things that he said was something to the effect of, there's no such thing as good or evil. People who are good or evil, it's just how people respond under pressure and how much of it they can take on. And I think, why do I say that? Because you mentioned that, and I'm not even saying I entirely agree with that, because I do actually
corn on the cob.
I do actually believe in the context of good and evil, like I'm as I'm getting older, in fact, interestingly enough, like that's something that's kind of seemed to be showing itself to me more. And of course, I'm all familiar with the Nietzschean take of it as well. And the thing that with that is you're saying, it was an extreme moment in time, and it's good to have reconciliation. I agree with you, but
I wouldn't
I
say total reconciliation. I just think that there are, if we're going to be, as we started off this conversation talking about the gray area, then we also have to apply elements of that gray area logic to not just somebody famous like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but also to the worries of or the mental extremities of a very pressurized situation.
I totally see that. I see where you're coming from. I actually think that's an important position to uphold. My take of it is just
it's not forgiveness. Like there are still friends of mine who still believe that over here Tony Holan and the health service did the best they could, and this, that, and the other. And now the guy Tony Holan, who basically locked the whole country down, is running for mayor, president. I mean, it's a disgrace. I mean, he never had to answer for any of his decisions. He never had to, nobody was held accountable for, the ruin they made of the country and people's liberties and freedoms. And I'll argue that to the death. But also friends of mine who stick to the narrative. They go, no, they did what they have to do. Doesn't matter how many statistics and other things you tell them. Doesn't matter how much, daily death rates and, young suicides of young peoples and the disruption. It doesn't matter. They just still believe it. And it was such a pressurized, such a crazy moment that I've sort of realized that if I held on to this, if I held the same furious viewpoint that I did when it ended, that it wasn't going to make my intellectual moral fiber any better. So it's kind of like not forgiving. It's just kind of, okay, we'll put that in a folder in the back burner and we'll try, and at least I'm not going to try and fall out with you. Plenty of people fell out with me over all of it. Quite a lot of people came to me afterwards and went, yeah, you were kind of right about, the effects of lockdown.
Which is great, by the way. And the thing is, none of us even had the full answers, even as we were going through it. I think one interestingly common thing that I was saying to people, but then I heard you say it as well. It was the fact of, this is going to be the worst I told you so ever. And I hope that I am wrong. Okay. I think both you and I were sharing that. But here's the thing I'll say, just to kind of quickly summarize the point I was trying to make with that. And again, it's actually with another quote, which I read somewhere and I thought is actually brilliant. And it said, how you acted during COVID is exactly who you are.
Yeah. I will put it like this. I used to think that I had more in common with people, and COVID showed me that I actually have less. I'm further out from the shore than I thought. I think that there is like,
interesting.
there's a body politic of people at 60% that if the government can manipulate and convince, they're going to take that first headline. They're going to read whatever in the news. And they're just, once you have 60% of public opinion, you have your mandate. Then there's, I think, a 20 odd percent, 25% of sort of floating, could be convinced either way, who are a little bit suspicious of the motives of authority, but don't fully engage in it. Then there's whatever your 10, 15, someone's going to add these up and say I got them wrong, but 10, 15% of people who are just naturally skeptical. But I realized, I'm even in the smaller, the 5% ratio of, as my, I've always had a position which was against or skeptical of authority, the motives of authority, of state, of police, of media, of whatever these things. As far back as I remember, I would look at a headline in the paper and go, who owns the paper? What is the, I don't know. I understand this is a very tiring way to think. And for friends of mine who just can't, they haven't got the fucking time. Maybe they got kids to bring up or whatever. Or also just, they don't have the mental space to.
It's tiring, but it's a necessary way to think.
It is, but there's only, so the 5 or 10% who are skeptical, they can convince chunks of that 15, 20, 25%. But your average person, I realize, like, is just only cares about themselves, their family, their immediate concerns, and their safety. As that JP Mencken quote, which is, your average man doesn't want freedom. He wants to be kept safe. And I realized that, like, many people are quite happy to have nothing on the menu other than one thing, because it means they don't have any choice. And also a friend of mine said to me a very interesting thing when lockdown started, and we were fucking, we were sitting in the apartment here, like raging and locked in, and I was fucking, and he said, listen, he goes, here's the fucking thing. You figured out the code. He goes, you've been, as a musician who travels and plays music and being creative, you're the last person who's going to be let out, and you're the first person in who had their whole livelihood taken from them, their whole raison d'etre, their whole purpose of being. And he says to me, your average person doesn't care if there's a theater or not. They don't care. What they care about is, well, he said to me very insightfully, he goes, most people work a job they don't fucking like. They deal with middle management they fucking hate. And now they have the opportunity to get up at 12, pad around in their pajamas, smoke weed and play Xbox. And they don't give a fuck about civil liberties and human rights, or they don't give a shit about these existential things that you care about. They don't give a fuck that the theater is closed and rotting and falling. But they don't care about any of these things. What they go is like, fucking brilliant. I'm being paid to not work. And as soon as he said that, I went, oh yeah. And he said to me, they also don't care that your life is gone, because the playing field has been leveled. If you were a fucking strong L losing at life before, and someone else, your buddy was achieving, and you had that bit of fucking hell, I deserve that. Now, all gone. And when he said that to me, I realized, like, yeah, you're fucking right. It was a real brutal, like a fucking punch in the face, which is like, no one cares about the things that you care about. So that's why I started the podcast, to try and say something, to speak out about. And episode 1 of the podcast is about digital IDs. And it's about, this is going to be used to create a digital identification system. It's going to be about UBI. It's going to be about all the things that now, 5 years later, people are starting to talk about. And now the people who went, I fucking, they're doing the best they can, are kind of going, all right. They see the playbook. But a lot of people are still, they don't. The amount of people who came to me and went, I really enjoyed it. And I said, and you realize that the loss of other people's freedoms, just nothing registered like that. They were like, I got to sit in the garden, drink wine at noon, play Xbox and smoke weed. And they were just like, fine, fuck that. So what lockdown is, it gave you a very deep insight, as you say, into what humanity would fall into those circumstances. And also terrified me, because it made me realize how fucking compliant people are. And if they're manipulated, that book, what is it? The Nudge. Have you ever heard of this book?
I haven't actually, no.
It's a book. It's about 10 years ago, or maybe it's 7 or 8 years ago. It's just written by a bunch of, and sort of social anthropologists, I think, of whom there were many on Sage and in Ireland and Nefet. There was no ecologists. The
Yeah.
nudge. Yeah, there's no economists on their backbenches going, these are going to be the economic effects of locking the society down. But it's about compliance. I mean, look, it could have been written by Heinrich Himmler, but the black arts of manipulating public opinion. And that's I hope that's pure gin, young man.
It's actually a mixture of pure vodka and orphan tears. But no, please carry on.
So, but the point was, the nudge is about compliance, and it's about what you do as a state, within war. I mean, like a military grade psyop of how to manipulate public opinion, and that's what was perpetrated on people. And people forget, and I remind them, don't forget. You did funerals on an iPad. You couldn't bury your dead. You couldn't hug your grandmother and grandparents as they rotted away in an elderly home. You couldn't, all these completely arbitrary bullshit, stand 2 meters away, nonsense, masks. But I mean, look, the droplets are so thin. You also absorb things through your eyes. It's just clearly the whole thing was nonsense.
Yeah.
Well, not the whole thing, apart from the death bit. Some people who died. But it was, it was a psyop.
But we can also talk about that part as well. People who died, like the comorbidities and everything else.
Yeah, dying with and from. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
The reassessment of the deaths, which you can also go and find, or like I go and look at the daily death rates in Western countries of for different age groups. I did it on purpose, because I would every now and again I would send a link to somebody who'd argued with me to the death and go, oh, you see, an unusual amount of young people are dying from whatever it would be, heart disease. That's the kind of morbid cunt that I am. And they'd be like, oh, that's unusual. I go, yeah, it's weirdly enough, it's 14% higher in countries. Anyway, let's not go down that road. But
no, but it's important. I'm actually, I don't think I'm quite over that particular part yet, because I have, a friend who I considered, like, we knew each other fairly well. This was actually someone who was one of my very first clients, age 30, no problems, no nothing, and then just drops of a heart attack out of fucking nowhere. Yeah, another guy from one of the local bands actually around where we are, 30 years old, he was actually in quite good shape too. Drops out of nowhere from a heart attack. And another guy who, I guess it's just it goes on and on.
If I thought about this, honestly, in the last 4 or 5 years, I know 50 to 100 people. Before 55. Anyway, look, the point being that we were clearly shown a very strange, dark side of human nature. I mean, I remember being in Germany, me and Joe from Gamma Bomb, we went over, we dotted all the T's and the I's. We went to Germany to see some thrash gig, and it was all the usual bullshit to get in and triple forms to get in to just have a beer. And we sat and watched hundreds of people queue to get into across the road from the bar that we had to sit like this apart, and there was plexiglass everywhere and all this shit. And we watched hundreds of people queue in like -6 temperature or something to get through one door all the way around. Everything manipulated, and they were building perspex screens to separate people in the shopping center. We were looking at the paper, and people were discussing the building of camps to send unvaccinated people. And I was there to my German mate, like, does this not spark any exclamation mark in your head going, something's not correct here? But that was the psyop. They were told people, this is a crisis of the unvaccinated or whatever,
which is absolutely ridiculous to think that now. And if you look at the statistics now, it's actually quite funny. But I say funny, it's actually tragic. It's not funny at all. But sometimes like you can't help but laugh, just because like that's the worst you can do. And the thing is as well, this situation, like COVID wasn't even that dire. Like fucking hell, like even the lockdowns, as damaging as they were, there could have been more detrimental situations, because the society is still up and running. Even the vaccines, okay, yeah, a lot of people maybe died from heart attacks or had all kinds of problems. I know people who got completely disabled from it, it's not all of that stuff, and miscarriages. But here's the thing. There's still a lot of those people who took 4 or 5 boosters that are still walking around. I don't know how, but they are. And there's people like you and I mean, I actually don't know about you, but, who never actually took it, and we're still walking around too. So at the end of the day, we can, it's kind of like, we should maybe like kind of look at each other and be like, okay, well, what was all that fucking divide for?
I mean, look, I'm not against vaccinations. I mean, if you look back at the history of vaccinations through humankind for the last 120, 30 years, whether it's polio or whatever, it wasn't that I was objected to. It was the system of coercion, that, the structure that was developed around it. It was, the concept of being vaccinated. I mean, I think it would be idiotic to look back to history and be...
sorry to interrupt your flow there, but I think the simple fact that we even have to explain that is fucking outrageous to me. Yeah. Like, how can people not see that? It's funny because some cunt... I was reading on Reddit and someone called me anti-vax, and I was laughing to myself. I was like, why would you be TRIVAX when instead you could be anti-vax? But
that's a pretty good t-shirt.
Yeah, right? But jokes aside, it's like, that was never my stance. I've never been like against modern medicine. I was just why the fuck are we like putting an experimental thing in ourselves that's actually redefining this pre-existing thing?
But look how the media did. What the media did. If you're, it's the same playbook they're using now, with with migration and stuff. Is the idea that call people like a COVID denier. So you're linking mentally Holocaust denier, COVID denier. I mean, and that's the.
That's in phobe territory.
There's never been a reckoning for what happened during COVID or lockdown, and there never will be, because all of the people who were complicit in this sort of manipulation of public opinion, this would require a complete turnabout from the media to go, well, hands up, we did the bidding of the state and we might have got it wrong. On the other side, having said this, it's clear that it showed the flaws of our democratic system, showed the flaws of politicians who are faced with like this, this, if you're standing in the jungle, if you hear a rustle in your hedgerow, no, if you're standing in the jungle and you hear something booming through the jungle, do you wait to see what it is, or do you fucking turn and run? And I understand that for a whole raft of middle management, civil service bureaucrats, this was way beyond their pay grade to have to deal with whatever the fuck this was. And what they didn't want was death on their checklist, on their obituary, public obituary, their political obituary, their political, they just didn't want that. Now, to kick the can down the road and have a public investigation 7 years away when they've made their money and they aren't in office anymore and they've moved away, or made their money or fucked off. Or somebody goes, well, cancer rates went up X amount because an oncologist warned that, people aren't coming to see us, and consultants kept patients at bay because, hey, great, they're being paid to do fuck all. Mm-hmm. If you can kick the repercussions down past your 4-year term, this is just what politicians did. And many, many people who were, and I know people connected to NEFET, who were like the Irish equivalent of SAGE, who were, the board of people who were making decisions on whether Irish people were free or not. If you knew stuff about them and knew who they were, as I found out, you would realize, fucking hell, these people aren't qualified to make these huge decisions about this. And the government just went, you do it. Because
can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that? Hey, just a quick moment of your time. For the past 3 years, Iblis Manifestations has been entirely self-funded. This means that every subscription fee, every piece of equipment, all of the travel expenses have come out of my own pocket. Over time, people have asked me how they can support the podcast, and to be honest with you, up until now, the answer's been pretty straightforward, and that is simply spread the word. But now, there's another way. I have set up a Patreon account where followers of the podcast will be able to make monthly donations to the podcast, and this will help cover the costs of streaming gear and basically everything else that goes into making this show. This isn't about making a profit, and to be completely honest, it's not about breaking even either, because that's certainly not been the case for the last 3 years. However, if you do find value in the conversations that we're having on this podcast and wish to help them forward, then you can now support the show. Just head to the link in description and hit the Patreon button. In addition to that, be sure to check out the Iblis Manifestations Big Cartel page, where we will be selling exclusive merchandise for the podcast. At the moment, we got the Extreme Podcast for Extreme People t-shirts, limited to only 30 copies, and the pre-orders will be sent out from the 1st of July. So the link for that is in the description. And in the future, the Big Cartel page will also include some occult accessories and jewelry, which will be handcrafted by myself. And we will also be selling merch and records by other bands as Iblis will expand into a label of its own. And, of course, it goes without saying, thank you for supporting Iblis Manifestations. It is much appreciated. Actually, what was this party then? Because you said that you found out that they weren't, so maybe if you can dig that a little.
Okay, well, so in Ireland, we had NEFET, that's the the consultants. It was a group of people, I think it was maybe like a dozen or 15 people who were put together to advise the government on lockdown. It was like the Irish equivalent of SAGE. And what you found is that there were no economists in it. There was, behavioral psychologists, people who were there because they were, they were trained in how human nature was and to react and how to get people, to coercion through fear. And you realize that very clearly now, before we get to the fact of the media has never done an investigation into, how well funded they were by, big pharma or something like this. And the idea that the sovereignty of our nation state was too small to resist the power of what was coming their way, which said, lock your fucking country down and shut your fucking mouth and take your fucking medicine. Which I think is totally true. But what I do think is that middle grade civil servants, this was way beyond their pay grade. They were just concerned about, do we have enough ICU beds? Oh, fuck, I hope this isn't on my watch. Basically, that's what they were hoping. Asking them to consider things like liberty, freedom, human rights. They were just like, fuck all that shit. Lock shit down so then I don't get the blame. I mean, that's basic unfortunate human nature, and it really uncovered the flaws of a democratic system. Authoritarian states don't have to do that. Of course, the projected, COVID is going to rifle through Africa. Did it? No, because I guess African people have been taking ivermectin since the 70s, the 80s, but that's an unpatented drug, right? Because they've been taking it for malaria and yellow fever and all sorts of other stuff like this. The projected rifling through never happened. So it's so fucking complicated. But to be a little bit charitable, I think an awful lot of people found themselves in the headlights and went, fuck, I don't know what the fucking right answer is to do. And in those circumstances, human nature is lock this shit down, is to be the most overcautious you can be. And that's what they fucking did. Now, they should never be forgiven for it. I mean, nobody will ever. There's going to be no inquiry. Their names aren't in the paper going, the erosion of civil liberties that occurred under your watch are now manifesting themselves in manifesting themselves across the West as governments lurch towards more authoritarian measures because they've realized, oh, fuck, this shit works. Cool.
Yeah, well, the fact of the matter
is very, very complicated. And I'm rambling, but that's what I'm here for, right?
No, absolutely, man. You ramble as much as you like. I like hearing your take on this because I think that you have a unique perspective on things. That's it's a.
Well, it could just be bullshit, also.
Well, this is. I don't think it's bullshit, but the way I look at, I know you're only joking. The way I look at it is, there are certain things, so to me, I do believe that there should be room for forgiveness, for forgiveness. And when I say forgiveness, I don't mean forgiveness of politicians.
No.
More so forgiveness of our own neighbors, which I know is very, very much actually a Christian thought process, who, by the way, Christians really impressed me. For the most part, they really impressed me during the lockdowns in how, well, not all of them, obviously, but how a lot of their communities, I thought they were like kind of like at the spearhead of the
beginning
of the resistance to a lot of this nonsense, actually.
Interestingly
enough, but
it speaks to the, it speaks to the the nature of Western society. And like even in Ireland, the government just went, shut the churches down. If you try to do that in 1975 or 1985, there would have been hell
You'd
to
get
pay.
bombed. Yeah.
There would be a metaphorically hell to pay. And it shows the godlessness of Western society. I'm not religious, but it showed it clearly, which was the government just went, shut your fucking churches down. They had slightly different laws for mosques and stuff, but by and large, the West shut its religion down.
Mm-hmm.
And it certainly wouldn't have been able to do that in another decade or, in the 70s or the 50s or whatever.
No, for sure. And I think it does.
Volumes,
it's one of those things that makes you think. It's one of those things that definitely makes you ponder on the sort of like the overall sort of propaganda of the world and the direction in which things are moving towards. Okay. The thing that I was going to say is what was particularly strange to me, as we were kind of coming to like the end of term for the COVID era, if you want to call it, was when all of those WhatsApp messages got leaked from inside the UK Parliament, where you got people like Matt Hancock literally saying at the beginning of the lockdowns, hey, try and spread as much fear as possible, which is literally what he said. And this is going back to March 2020. Oh, we want the public to be this and that. And then meanwhile, they were having their own parties. Yeah. What really frustrated me, at least about the British public's reaction to this, okay? And when I say the British public, I mean not everyone, obviously, but the majority of the reactions that I was seeing on social media was the fact that everyone was saying, oh, how dare you have parties during lockdowns? Not the fact that, oh, you knew this is not dangerous. Yeah. You knew that this is not a problem, and you're still going ahead with your day. And it's like one rule for thee, not for me. And I was a bit disappointed. It's like we should be asking a much bigger question here instead of just being mad that they had parties. You should be mad not because of the party itself. What they were doing was the normal thing. The situation they put you in, that was the abnormal situation.
I think also people got incredibly fatigued by the end of it. And when it all disappeared, literally it was announced for like one night, it's over tomorrow. I was one of those people, when it happened, I said, oh, this is going on for years. And everybody was like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's in my first couple of podcasts. I'm like, hey, buckle up.
I think I remember it actually.
Yeah. Buckle up is going to be about, I said it 2 to 3 years. People were just like, what are you talking about? And I was like, no, this is, and like, I still have friends and I go, and you go, look, come on, really? Bats to pangolins? And they go, what are you talking about, pangolins? I'm like, you forgot already. You forgot. Like, the bats to pangolins, the narrative that was given to us, not that it escaped from the laboratory that studies the exact same thing, which already had safety procedural issues, that gain of function research had moved to. I said, and they were like, oh, and I said, see, to my friends who I raged against during it all, I was there, you already forgot your origin story. Your origin story was a lie. And the BBC produced documentaries. And I still have friends who go, oh, no. And I go, what the fuck are you talking about? But I also understand that, like I said, a lot of people just didn't obsess about this stuff so much. They just went, look, this is the way it is. It'll be all right in a few years. But for those of us who are wired up a bit differently, I think in the fullness of time, it'll be seen as one of the most pivotal moments in human history, maybe comparable to like the fall of the Berlin Wall or something, at least in our time. Because don't forget, previous to that, I think that you can, in the West at least, maybe not Eastern Europe, you can look at the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of communism, and then there's a sort of birth of a new emergent middle class across most Western societies in the 1990s and 2000s, with the exception of the Balkan Wars, which were pretty brutal in that area. Most of Europe enjoyed a kind of economic prosperity that it hadn't seen for a long time in the 1990s and 2000s. And there was actually relative optimism in countries. If you were to ask people in 1998, or even 2002, do you feel optimistic? I guarantee there were, by many magnitudes of percentage, more optimistic than people now. This is also to do with smartphones and the news that people get now. But we chart that to the crisis of 2008. And I think you can go from the banking collapse of 2008 will lead you to lockdown. And then, you know, the amount of money that was printed, more money was printed than ever existed before in those couple of years, which was mostly stolen by or laundered, or, you know, to corrupt institutions of technocratic digital manipulation, whatever you want to say. And you can chart those graphs. And literally, it's such a pivotal moment because I think it paved the way, or will pave the way, in another 5 years for what I hope doesn't happen. Like I said, like I said to you, I hope to be wrong, that we aren't slowly slipping into some Chinese like social credit score system with digital IDs and universal basic income and CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. And that is the worry, that lockdown and COVID was just a sort of a very handy moment for those organizations who wished and willed that to just kick into gear and not let a good crisis go to waste. Now, whether they engineered the crisis, I mean, that's very complicated. Other question. I don't necessarily agree with that. But
I don't even know. You say it's complicated. I don't even know if it's that complicated when you look at the history of people leaving certain companies and then obviously starting to work on the vaccines before this whole fucking thing even happened. When you start looking at the timeline of that, there's a lot of very questionable shit around it.
Oh, there's so much questionable shit, which that's what makes it complicated to me.
Yeah. Well, it's the same as 9/11 as well. We don't have to go into that one, but you know, the point is,
I think most things are complicated. And it frustrates my friends. So many of my friends who want, you know, because that's what the gray area is. It's examining the panoply of complicated, minute details that go into everything, and that's what obsesses me, or that's what I think about all of the time. And I understand for most people that can be just beyond tiresome. They're like, well, you know, if I talk to Kieran from Primordial, who literally is the complete opposite me as a person, and somehow he's had to deal with me for 35 years and sit in the back of, he has spent years of his life sitting in the back of a van listening to me talk like this, and he's just been like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he's just like, this is just, even listening to you makes me fucking, melts my fucking brain. But it's just sometimes it's the way you're wired up, you know, and that's I think about all those things all of the time. And so this COVID was lockdown. See, again, friends of mine, like a friend of mine has 3 kids, and he said to me, like, look, I get it, what you think, but if I thought what you think, I couldn't get up in the morning to get my daughters up for, you know, lockdown school or whatever. I can't do that. He goes, I have to have faith that the system has my interests at heart. And I said to him, well, I know it doesn't. And I can give you 100 historical examples in 10 minutes. What I want is just 10% of your rational skepticism to just question some of the things that are happening. And he just says, look, I haven't got fucking time. And if I believe the things you believed, that the world is this dark, how the fuck do we function? That's what I found was the hardest thing to kick against, because people just wouldn't, if they hopped over the wall to where you were looking at the world, they'd be just like, Jesus Christ, like, how the fuck do we function as a society if it's only the darkest things, you know?
This is the problem. That thing of I don't have time. I empathize with the difficulty that people might have in their own life that would make them say something like that. But, you know, by the way, as a fitness coach, that's something that I hear all the time. Not necessarily from my own clients, but I see it from other people all the time. Why don't you train? Oh, I don't have time. Yeah, you have time. you can make time. You fucking make time for that. You take responsibility for your own
you know
life.
what?
And,
Maybe it's...
and the thing is, I think that, it's the lack of, it's the lack of urgency and the lack of taking ownership of your own life that really bothers me. And the thing is, I don't want to sit here and cast judgment on people, because that's not exactly what I'm doing. I'm just saying that every single one of us is a lot more capable than we realize we are. And, and if it's in the case of, like, let's say your kids, well, I don't know, you can fucking homeschool them, or like learn to understand the reality of things,
I think it's slightly different. It's not really time. It's something more metaphysical. It's something more innate.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, like, when my oldest friend, since we're 4 years old, 3 years old, we know each other, and which is a long time now. We still see each other all the time. We argued like cats and dogs about this stuff. We never fell out, because that's the kind of man he is. But he has a bunch of kids, and he just said to me, he just says, I have to believe that the narrative that I'm getting has something in it for me. And it's not because he hasn't got the time to read The Nudge or whatever else. I mean, he doesn't, because he's trying to bring kids up in the chaos of all that kind of stuff. He just sort of said to me, like, it's very different once you have kids and when you don't. And your view of the world and your responsibility changes. And he says that if I empathize with him, and I just sort of said, well, I'm only looking for 10%. Just give me a bit of your rational skepticism. But he just said, if I do that and I open the door a bit, and I found this with a lot of people, if they open the door to questioning the motives, of which they should, of course, you should question the motives of state and authority, and again, it's an uncomfortable place to be, to realize, like, oh, I was lied to, I accepted the lie, and I was manipulated. That's a place where most people just they don't want to go to, because it invokes too many problematic questions,
So what I would like to add to that really is the fact that, the truth isn't always going to be a pretty thing.
No.
Okay. And there are many different aspects of that in life. Okay, here's an example. Okay, so let's say in the context of a relationship. Okay, let's say a man and wife. Okay, boyfriend and girlfriend, whichever. Every single relationship that has ever existed in the history of the world, and currently exists and will exist, has one thing in common. They all have an expiry date. You either break up or one of you dies.
Sure. Yeah.
Does that mean that you now stop loving each other? That you stop spending time with each other? Okay. And that may be a reality and a truth that is uncomfortable to think about. And a lot of people will say, oh, I just don't want to think about that. And I kind of get it, but I like to think about that. Why? Because to me, it's a bitter, harsh truth that I think that, the knowledge of the truth is something that can assist our behavior. It can assist how we approach life. It can assist how we do things, because then we are more meaning focused. Then we are more focused on actually doing what matters and stripping away and trimming the fat and the nonsense from life. Okay, which we all will get dragged into, some of us more than others. And I would say even, with someone like yourself and I, who maybe live kind of like, on the outskirts of life, like the Gigi Allen song. I think even with people like us, we still have plenty of that fat and bullshit that we still need to trim away, just to get to the core meaning, as to the essence of why we do things, and that rebellious and revolutionary spirit that exists within us is there for a reason. It's not a case of a rebel without a cause, at least not at this point, maybe when we were teenagers. And I think that some truths are going to be very harsh to deal with. You might find out that the reason why you look out in the sky and there's blackness in between the stars is because we are already inside a supermassive black hole. You may find out that your parents, like your dad was cheating on your mother the entire time that they were together, and you grew up with them and you never knew that, and then now maybe he's not there anymore. I'm making hypothetical examples, although I think the black hole situation might actually be real. But nevertheless, is what you make of it in the now and in the moment, and I think that is the spirit that defines us all, So even that quote that I said earlier, how you acted during COVID is who you are. It's not about COVID. COVID don't fucking matter anymore. It's not about that, but it's about what we choose to act upon in the moment that we have. Okay. And I think that the more you shut your eyes to the truth of things, the whole, I don't have time for that, or the metaphysical reality that you said that you don't want to face that because it makes it impossible for you to get up in the morning, face that. Face whatever bullshit that is, and still choose to get up in the morning in spite of it. At least that's the spirit that I would like to know that leads me in my life.
I mean, okay. I think in relation to the particular example I was giving, it's easy for me, a man who doesn't have kids, to give advice to my best friend who does have three. In a very, a moment of intense crisis and complications. And so sure. In that moment, I understood what he was saying. And so the compromise between us would have been, hear me out, and then if you can give me 10, 15, 20% of your rational skepticism, to just the odd time go, is that right? Does that seem correct? But look, I mean, there are plenty of people who just, look, we know this, they just follow rules. And it's what this moment showed us is that there are an awful lot of people who really like to be told what to do. And they really enjoy rules. They enjoy all of the structure around them. And you saw how easily people were being told to inform on each other and to tell on each other. And there were cops going around arresting people for swimming in one place 50 meters up from the other, even though they were on an isolated beach and all this kind of stuff.
Which, by the way, that part scared the shit out of me because it reminded me of being in Iran, going to our little basement rehearsal that we built with all those egg cases all over the walls near Mini City in Tehran, and actually getting threats from the neighbors that they were going to give us away to the police if we continued making noise, all to just save their own skin, just to make themselves look better. It's that Orwellian thing where every citizen can become an agent of the Matrix.
Exactly. Well, if you look at, many of the things that are happening right now, and I think COVID was a very good example, lockdown was a very good example, it showed us the divide and conquer strategy, the nature of authoritarianism that, like I said, when me and Joe were in Germany and they were putting perspex screens in the supermarket, and it was so Orwellian.
Yeah.
And I said to my German friend, you guys are, there's talk of building camps. I said, dude, come on, what note does that strike in you from history? And it's like he just hadn't thought about it. And he went, oh. I went, yeah. Do you get that? And they were there in Australia, and look at it's. Yeah, it was a very. I agree with you. It showed us a very dark side of human nature, and this was the moment where I realized I was further out from the shore than I previously thought, and it showed me like you're going to have some kind of escape plan, because surely this is incoming again at some stage. What the fuck is your escape plan? And unfortunately for most people these days, the escape plan seems to be learn a bespoke analog craft, become a plumber or become a carpenter, head for the woods, buy a shotgun and have a family and get out of the fucking cities. So what I was thinking about today, I wanted to run this by you, which I would have done before we start talking about things that people have heard me say a million times, but I was thinking about this today, that we're very close to the moment where because I keep getting lately you're getting to the idea that ChatGPT or AI is almost at the place whereby people are going to be able to digitally reanimate their dead relatives to converse with. That ChatGPT is going to be or whatever, some other, learning model is going to be that, obviously, cleverer than us or whatever, but it's going to be able to go through, let's say your parents and you have a kid who died and he's 20. You're going to be able to use all of his social media and all of his posts and all the things he wrote to inform AI of his character or her character, and have a screen avatar of your dead kid that you're going to be able to speak to and converse with every day. I was just thinking about this all morning. The idea, it's some science fiction movie, of course, but reanimating the dead through digital means, and them actually being realistic enough that human beings are going to have the option to, I could bring back my grandfather. Maybe there isn't enough digital information about him. Maybe not, but at least in the next generation, in the next 10, 15 years. Sorry, that's what I've been thinking about all day.
That's it's an interesting one, because I've thought about that idea actually quite a bit the last few years, especially, but I haven't had the chance to talk about it. And you know what?
I had an argument with ChatGPT only last night, questioning the things it was putting in information. We're arguing about the Orwellian nature of the concept of hate speech. And we're having a full-blown argument about it back and forth. And it was going, I see your point, but maybe this. And I go, well, no, I disagree with you about this. And it was going back and forth and back and forth. And it's funny, I screen grabbed it and I sent the whole conversation to my friend who'd never used it. And he's like, what the fuck? That's fucking mental. And it goes, yeah, good point. Yeah, fair enough. I get it. I get your point. And like, if that had a face and a voice, it would be the nearest thing to a person living in my apartment that I would speak to. Am I going to go down that road, or I'm going to start, how are you this morning? Tell me this, blah, 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 blah. What's going on between Azerbaijan and Armenia? By the way, didn't they just sign a peace deal?
I think they did. Yeah.
Didn't get much news either. I think people were talking about Sydney Sweeney while Azerbaijan and Armenia signed a peace deal in the White House, no less. Anyway, but do you know what I mean? It's like,
that idea, Alan, I'll be honest with you, man. So that idea is something I've thought about a lot. We can talk about it if you want.
Sure. It's probably more interesting than talking about lockdown again, because people are going to be like, fuck off with this shit. I think,
the lockdown is over. The conclusion is, I hope we learn from that, and I hope we can do better next time, because next time is not going to be as easy as that. So that's all I'm going to put out there, leave it on the more philosophical
My feeling
note.
is that the people who took, the people who used the crisis to their own advantage learned a lot, and governments learned a lot in terms of authoritarian measures and the slow erosion of liberty. That's what I sadly think. I think, unfortunately, human nature might be the same again, only hopefully the percentage of rational skeptics is greater than it was before. But anyway.
Well, I do think, though, that to look at the light side of things, like, you are unfortunately right about that. But I do also think that on the other side of it, it created a crack in the system and the matrix that's irreparable, and too many people woke up. They woke a lot of fucking people up, and I think with some of the stuff and like the Epstein files and everything, I think people are waking up for the second time now, But anyway, I don't want to go down too much down the rabbit hole. I want to kind of just reel this back into what you mentioned there.
Yeah. So just trying to derail the conversation.
AI, that's okay, man. It's free flowing. This conversation is not does not follow reels. We're two free thinkers. We go where the fuck we want to. Okay, sure. And I'm very much enjoying it exactly for that reason. So you mentioned about AI replicating dead relatives. That's an idea that I think is probably one of my biggest fears. It terrifies the fucking shit out of me. And I know you might think, well, why? Wouldn't that be what we want? Isn't that what we've kind of always wanted?
What, to live forever? Or to reanimate you? Yeah.
And I think that, because I am someone, I consider myself to be very much a spiritual person, very much a spiritual leaning person, okay? I very much believe, mostly based on personal experience, kind of starting out, so I'll give you my own sort of evolution first, just so you understand where I'm coming from. Okay, I think the context is important here. I grew up in an Islamic country. Okay, so by default, I was a Muslim through childhood. As a child, I did believe in the idea of a God. I kind of had my own relationship with it, I guess as I do now. But as a childhood, it was very much a stripped down thing. As a teenager, I was an actual full-on practicing Muslim. Okay, sure. I did all of the prayers. I did all the stuff. I knew all the verses, everything like that. Momentarily after the discovery of black metal, I was a full-on atheist, okay, sure. And an ex-Muslim, all right. I say momentarily, it was like a year after, but, nevertheless. That's got its own thing. And then later, I kind of started getting into the more occult and the esoteric, and then the more left-hand path side of spirituality, which I think that, thanks to Morbid Angel and the likes, and then that side of the music that we get into, you kind of end up, some of us, I think yourself included, maybe you become more interested in that side of things, and then start looking into the more occult side of things, and that's its own whole world. But then even by that point, I was more of an agnostic in that realm. And then I had a bunch of really extreme paranormal things happen to me in 2016. And then from there, I was basically a believer. I just didn't really know what to make of stuff. I just knew by that point that, okay, so some of this shit can actually manifest in the physical reality, and you can actually interact with it in a pretty fucking vivid way, even when you are awake and going about your daily life. And that changed everything for me. That changed what I understood of science. It changed what I understood of the reality of life. Fast forward from that, where I am now, and the sort of like the understanding that at least I try to have of the world that we live in. It's funny. I was walking through the Cardiff town centre today, and in my surroundings, I was like, there's people walking around, and everyone's got their own magnetic field surrounding them, and the energy that they're projecting out into the world, which is like, it's a palpable thing. You may not see it with the eye, but you can feel it. And all of these areas are these magnetic fields. And in these fields, there's the memory of, or at least even maybe the presence of everyone who came before, the parents of all of these people, the people who walked these streets long before any of us were around. And the idea that we may use AI to bring back these dead relatives is scary to me, not because it's a surface thing, but because I genuinely worry. How do I even materialize this thought? Because it's a genuine concern for me. Let's say if a paranormal experience is something that is mostly based on our interaction with the, should we say, the electromagnetic realm, if you can call it a realm, and things that have kind of been and gone and left a residue in the world that we live in, and then our minds and the energy that we have simply activates these things to happen. There's nothing more terrifying to me than having a supermassive quantum computer that can revive and manipulate that energy into what it wants, because that sounds like possibly an afterlife that is shaped into a technological prison. So what do I mean by that? I understand this is a very complex thought to have, but let's say upon the moment of death, if you are to dissolve into nature, so energy never dies or gets created, it simply changes format. If the idea of death is that you simply change format and you break down into different pieces and your energy gets transferred back into nature, then that's where you're meant to be. You're meant to go back into the cycle of nature, and that's where you belong. Fine. And that's one of the reasons why it pisses me off that we decided to deprive the earth of our dead by placing them inside caskets and concrete, or deciding to burn them, which, by the way, cremation is actually a terrible idea. When you get an urn, only 5% of that is the person that you were looking for. The rest of it is bullshit. And the crackling sound that you hear is the sound of tooth fillings exploding. Anyway, that idea or that residue that I speak of, which if you want to call it the ghost or like the aftermath of the dead, or simply the dead, the idea of a quantum computer manipulating that when you are in that state of taking nature and manipulating that, to me sounds like doing the work of God and manipulating that. And I think that's that sounds like a terrible fucking idea, and it just scares the shit out of me.
Welcome to the Old Testament. There's a lot to unpack there. Firstly, to say I'm not spiritual. I don't believe that there's electromagnetic residue of the people who went before. I pretty much, I believe that, I don't believe much, but I think that the journey is important to people as it gives definition to their lives, but I don't believe in a destination. But I think that if you look at almost all the syntax of almost all religious texts, they have a creation myth. They have a God creation, like a godlike creation myth. And I think that you can interpret the generation of this. You can, I think, interpret the creation of this large language model, which soon will outstrip us as being the apex intelligence on the planet, as perhaps the creation myth, that all points have led to this point. And
the electronic caterpillar situation.
Well, a guy put it to me, put it in a podcast very cleverly the other day. He's one of the people who helped create these large language models, these learning models. And he just said, when you're no longer the apex intelligence on Earth, and the other guy said, well, are we talking about how we treat monkeys? And he just says, well, how about how we treat chickens?
Oh, I heard that. This was on Rogan, right? That rings a bell, actually.
No, it's some other podcast. I was listening to with this sort of old AI guy.
Sure.
No, I mean,
anyway, didn't mean to interrupt. Please carry on.
No, it's okay. I mean, there's an awful lot to unpack in what you said. And like I said, I'm not particularly spiritual person. Like I said, I think that we are, if we're hunter-gatherers living with medieval institutions, but with religions formed in our sort of, long past subconscious, from the days when we didn't understand our ability, we did our relationship to the elements or whatever, and we called them names. And if you look at what the devil is, he's the horns of Loki, the hooves of Pan, the whatever, all these kind of things. I mean, the whole religious, what you say, entomology, or the whole religious history, of these sort of pre-Christian histories and stuff. That, I mean, I'm really super fascinated by that. And of course, you go into like any medieval town and you walk into the church is the most imposing, incredible building that strikes fear and awe into you. And it inspires that in a medieval world that didn't understand science or whatever. So I find the marriage between the spiritual and the scientific a bit uncomfortable. Not uncomfortable, I just don't really agree with it. But at the same time, as I get older, I'm less of a, I'm not really, what would be the word? I'm not really atheistic. I'm not really agnostic. I'm sort of open. I'm an open skeptic, maybe we could say. But
well, I think that's a necessity, regardless of what you believe in. I think is to be an open skeptic, and I'll tell you, like, I'm personally not exempt of that. So, what are your thoughts on the whole AI reviving dead people situation? Then,
it's just very interesting to me because it could be, in especially in 5 or 10, 15 years. Now, I'm very fascinated by I've been trying to follow the AI thing as close as possible. And with all the different people talking about it, and I know plenty of people just find it bewildering and sort of. It's only now we're just at the tip of this moment where people. I was talking to a guy I was playing football with, and he's a lawyer, I think, and he was just saying, we're having to use ChatGPT now as part of our being a lawyer.
Yeah.
And he says what it is, it's just a tool. It's like an extra weapon, and so what will happen is that people will go, lawyers who are facing each other have to use it. Otherwise, one is at a disadvantage,
Yeah.
And that's it slowly creeping into every aspect of our life. I mean, like I said, I probably use it every day with something or other. I want to know something about, like, say, a 1960s countercultural religious movement from California, or something. I want, who are they? What is this? I find a reference. And that's okay. If you want to ask it very pointed political modern questions, it will kind of stonewall you a bit about some things. But like I said, in the next 2-3 years, the exponential growth of its understanding and intelligence, I mean, we're at the cusp of some very strange moment in society. And I was just thinking about, like, that's what I was thinking about today. I was talking to my mother, and I said, if I died tomorrow, there's enough of me online talking to you, think of the amount of interviews I've done over the last 25 years, hundreds and thousands, right? There's probably hundreds of hours, there's 250 podcasts, everything. This side of the screen could be just a screen in the corner of my parents' house, right? In the kitchen, and my mother could be just making dinner going, yeah, but like, just like it was me, except it's me on a screen. The AI will be clever enough to interpret my character, my intonation, my inflections, my fucking stupid hats that I wear, whatever it is. But it knows so much about me because there's so much of me online.
Yeah.
And it's a huge question. Same with yourself. And I was thinking,
I have actually thought that, man. It's a crazy idea.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this. That's what I've been thinking about for the last couple of days. Could my mother resist the temptation? Do you know what I mean? Could your grieving parents, because their son is taken too early, or not early enough, as some people would say, but no, I mean, you could just be a screen in the corner, or, like a projection or whatever, you know what I mean? And they could just click you on and go, hey, how are you today? Yeah, I'm doing okay, blah, 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 blah. And then is there going to be some point where I'm going to be in some other metaphysical verse, some other not a metaverse, but some other digital online, basically like your consciousness is uploaded to some other space. Yeah. I don't know, let's say intended.
Well, let's make one thing clear. If anyone from the future is listening to this right now, leave me the fuck alone and do not touch my guitars, otherwise I will come back and fucking haunt your ass. There we go.
Yeah, but you could be in the other space, right? So yeah, it's just something I was thinking about, the idea that
I meant that.
Imagine your kid was 16. One of the reasons why I was thinking about this was because I was watching a documentary about this kid who had severe, I'm not sure what, some sort of severe illness where he couldn't leave his wheelchair, but he was playing computer games all the time, and he's kind of had to do his little, the hand movements and everything. But because he was so ill, he just couldn't go outside. But he died at like 23. And it was when he died, his parents put some note saying, Jonas is dead, whatever it is. Can't remember the name of the documentary. And they started to get tons. If you want to message us or speak to anybody, they started to get thousands of messages from people who gamed with him, and they were part of the world where he was actually a different character in a game. And I was watching this, and I was thinking, I can't remember the name of it, and I was thinking to myself, imagine that you're a completely other person, and maybe you could die in this realm and then still continue to be that other person in the game, or like I said. Maybe there's an app with your parent, which let's call it Reanimators, Mutilations, or whatever. No, what's it called? H.P. Lovecraft. What's that? Herbert West Reanimator app, and you put in whatever your dead relative, and it combs the internet for all the information. It just goes click. Okay, here you go. Are your parents or your sister, whoever, are they going to resist the ability to click you on and chat with you for a few hours every evening, or watch the TV with you, or anyway, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think
human nature we already know the answer, that human nature is going to be impossible to resist an avatar of, and they say that most young people now, their first relationships they form are with their gaming group or whatever, they're online. So what if people now, I've started to notice ads everywhere for like AI friends or whatever, sort of, because let's be honest, why are podcasts so popular? Because it's a voice, it's someone speaking. I have to admit, my listener, the amount of hours I listen to music compared to what I used to, it's not even 10%, because when I wake up in the morning, I put on podcasts, people speaking. Now I happen to live alone. And so that's probably, it speaks to the atomized nature of modern society, where people want a voice to listen to, whether it's working, whether it's whatever, because they are atomized and alone, also thanks lockdown for that. But do you know what I mean?
Well, that's a very good point. I'm actually the same, and I have noticed this myself. The main place I'll listen to music now
is at the gym or traveling.
Exactly. Or when I'm making it, then that forces me to have to pay attention, which is so bizarre actually when you think about that. But this is the thing, there's also problems with that as well. Okay, so where do you extract
there's so many fucking moral and intellectual problems with reanimating your dead brother to sit in the corner and interact with. Do you know what I mean?
That's it. If you use someone's inbox, for example, on Instagram, all you're gonna get is a horrible fucking racist and a bigot, just because of the memes and the jokes people send each other, which is, by the way, everyone. It's everyone.
Yeah, no, it's just fascinating. And I think that we're at the cusp of some things are really going to change. Being a musician standing on a stage, I mean, it's still an analog process of interaction that I think is going to be difficult to replace. But I mean, if you're out there and you're studying to be an accountant, fucking forget it. I mean, you saw the list of jobs that are just going to go. Microsoft released this list of jobs that are going to go. And it's just if you're studying any one of these things now, I don't know what the fuck you're going to do,
Yeah, no, I feel that, man. It's the same as, even for me being a fitness coach. It's a bit different because I know personally what works.
Sure.
But I'm aware that someone... Actually, you know what? I'll be honest with you. I'm less concerned about this at the moment, because I tried to use ChatGPT for this a couple of times to see if, how it fares in terms of coming up with meal plans and stuff. It's actually really bad. It's not good at all. Yeah. I tried it, and the way it was trying to give me stuff, and I kept telling it that, well, this is in this area. For example, I asked for it to give me... I was just playing around with it, because I already know how the shit works. I've already got the fucking education on it, and I've been doing it for years. But out of curiosity, I was like, let's give this thing a go. And it might have improved since I tried this. But I was like, okay, put together a vegan dish for me with the so-and-so macros and exactly this much calories. And it did, but then they didn't match the numbers I gave it. I said that... That's not, well, this isn't exactly correct. And then he was like, yes, you are right. So in order to do that, we got to do this and this and this. And then he still got the number wrong. And he kept getting that kind of shit wrong. I was like, okay, so you're not very good at this. So maybe us fitness coaches and dietitians still have a chance. But the thing is, it will eventually catch up, So I think the fact of the matter is, it gets to the point where it's not even the skill set anymore. Which we all have, whether you're a carpenter, those kind of jobs won't be in as much. Well, I mean,
I'll give you a good example in that at the age that I am now, I'm starting to fall apart from running and training, and I'm constantly getting muscle injuries and this and the other. I go to my doctor and he goes, yeah, rest. Fucking great. Thanks for that, man. Brilliant. And he'll do a little bit of manipulation. He'll go, yeah, all right, well, I'll go straight to ChatGPT and I go, okay, it's a horizontal pain behind my kneecap. This weight, this age, this blood type, blah, 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 blah. I'll put in every single detail when I'll go back and forward and go, is that my patella? Is that my whatever? What stretches are recommended for that? This is infinitely better than my doctor. He'll just be like, no, just rest, you're old. Fuck off. Do you know what I mean?
So when it recreates you, it also knows what your legs were like. So it'll recreate your...
but I give it, but it depends on the information you give it. Do you know what I mean? You have to give it everything. And then I'll also ask it, okay, so if we're recommending this, this, and this, I'm in Ireland, I can't get it because we have a pharmaceutical cartel here. So we don't get fucking good medicine, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, the serious stuff you get in the States. I go, so where can I order this from? Blah, 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 blah. Oh, you need to send away to Serbia. All this kind of stuff but it's, you're about to run out of time, are you?
No. All good, man. All good.
But I think that people are going to do this because they're going to go, well, why the fuck would I pay €100 to a doctor to go, yeah, just rest? Thanks, man. Or, like, fuck this, let's go straight to actually maybe an optical chat GPT you can look at. I think so many things are under threat, consultants, people who've just been sort of stealing a living, in certain sectors, are going to be under a lot of stress and pressure. And it is.
I've known people like that. I've met a few people like that, who are actually like quite old, but then they kind of pass as like a computer expert, and they don't know jack shit. They don't even know how to change. They maybe know how to change the fucking desktop background, and it's like, bro, how the fuck have you winged it so far? But only because they've been able to leech onto people who don't know shit.
I'll give you a good example. We're playing in Mexico next month, and everybody trying to fly home was trying to avoid the States. And I was there going, why the fuck you want to avoid the States? Oh, Mexico, you have to come out. There's visa issues. This and that. I go, well, we're European. There's no visa issues. And this argument is going on back when I was there. All right, shut the fuck up. Straight into ChatGPT 5. I'm Irish. I have ESTA. Can I land in America? And then connect the flight to Dublin. And it just went, yes, blah, 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 blah. Cut, paste, here. Shut the fuck up. Oh, and I said, will you please put this on your computer to stop these travel agency discussions? This is just fucking ridiculous. Of course you can land in the States. We're from fucking Ireland. We have ESTA. We don't have visas. We're not playing in the States. Do you know what I mean? It's just, It's just, you're trying to cut out like 3 days of email discussion. It's so fucking tiresome. But ultimately, there's no need for you to have a travel agent. So that somebody's job is going to disappear very shortly. Do you know what I mean? There's no need to have this third party there. There's no, so, it's complicated, because by using that, I'm hastening the demise of the person at the other end that I'm using with. But at the same time, it's like, you have to know whether we can fly in and out of America or not. So yeah, it's complicated, isn't it? Because it's like, give it a really boring example. Okay. A relative of mine, how can we say, works for the Irish Civil Service, and was charged with the updating the payment system, which of course it's Ireland, it's outdated, right? This is a digital payment system, right? It's outdated. Yeah. And so I had to look into this. And I mean, is that the most boring? Is that the most boring task you've ever heard of? Right. I mean, it fucking is, right? And said relative was just at their wit's end. And I had my iPad, and I said, shut the fuck up for a minute. And I said, all right, ChatGPT, what is the Irish digital payment system for the civil service in really explicit detail? And it was like, they're using this. And I said, and how does that compare to other European standards? Well, it's behind, it's this, that, the other. So what should they do to upgrade, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, can you write all of this out in an easy English, non-technical explanation forum for a presentation that, in PowerPoint format? It's 6, 7, 8 minutes, it's done. The most boring thing ever. And said relative did this presentation. They were like, holy fuck, how the fuck did you know all this stuff? But how could you know the infinite details of this thing? It would take people weeks to research. Because of course, don't forget, if your civil service is anything like our civil service, they're probably still using operating systems from 2006 with a firewall from 2008, fucking, Avanti antivirus or something, McAfee antivirus, and all these systems. Even in hospitals, they're using electronic machinery that, has fucking ancient firewalls and all this kind of stuff. And so the people working there don't want to update and get a new system, because they could make their jobs redundant, and the union says they're not skilled for this upgrade. Yeah, very boring, right? Yeah, I can see your face.
Well, it's one of those things.
You're just like, what the fuck? But the point is, weeks of research was done in 7 minutes. And also it was understood what to do, and they implemented the change. And now everybody's like, oh, great. Now we have a digital payment system that's up to date. Yeah. So that's kind of, it's a very boring signpost on a road to kind of where we're going, isn't it?
it's an interesting one, you know, and being in the middle of it is
interesting.
Crazy.
It's a very uninteresting way of saying something interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but the thing is, I would put that the other way around, actually. Yeah, okay. But the thing is, it's you know, it's one of those things that. Gosh, being in the middle of it is very confusing, because it's kind of like, where the fuck is this gonna go? Like, what does this look like in the long term? Because now it's sort of like one thing kind of becomes redundant, so you jump onto the other thing. You know, it feels like there's this edge of a cliff that keeps crumbling, and what we're doing is jumping from rock to rock as it's like kind lemmings. Of floating. Yeah. And exactly, but then it is still crumbling away. So what is that going to look like in the long run?
Did you see that interview with Peter Thiel, the Palantir guy, who have just been handed like incredible powers by the administration in the USA? And if you've seen the interview where the guy's like, well, shouldn't the human race keep going? And he's just like, well, I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah,
seen his interview, and he's just like, and they're talking about the end of the human race, and he's like, well, I don't know, do we really? You should watch it. It's like, if this doesn't scare people, and now Palantir are, you know, they want to take over everybody's digital information and, you know, facial recognition IDs and all this kind of stuff. And the guy who runs it, well, Peter Thiel, is just a bit like, you know, he sits on the fence of whether humanity is worth keeping around or not.
Yeah, which is very unfortunate, actually. I think, you know, like, I can see the point, you know.
Well, I've only got about 10 years left, so, you know.
10 years? Bro, more like 5.
Yeah.
No, sorry, that's a very mean joke.
Fair. 5 years being productive and creative. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. No. May you have another 50 at least, my man. And with all this with all this AI stuff happening, you never know. Might end up getting a billion years. I might be
better off being an avatar in the corner of the kitchen, just complaining about fucking politics.
That's it. Well, tell you what, Alan, my man, this was such a fucking blast of a conversation.
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe, because this is a topic I can fucking talk about all night. I said that to you before we started recording. I was like, yeah, you and I are gonna be fucking at it. You know, I can see why. So I would love to do some more of these with you at some point, you know. And if the listener is not currently hanging from a noose strapped to the ceiling, you know, then I think we're good. You know, you can maybe come back the next time.
That's the thing, isn't it? Like, it's just like, is that the dark side of human nature, the dark side of things? That's what's interesting. Like, I have friends who just go, fucking hell, can you stop? I can't take anymore. And I go, well, to me, that's just interesting.
Yeah.
All this kind of stuff. I don't have, you know, I don't have those sort of, I don't know, what would you call it? Thoughts that aren't like that are few and far between. So I've been thinking, like I said, the avatar in the corner for me dying tomorrow, and how it interacts with my family. I've been thinking about that during the week, and I thinking about how annoying it could be. Or do you just go over and switch it off, or do I have the power as the avatar to go, nope, not so easy, switch myself back on and take control over the refrigerator, and, you know. Anyway,
but the thing is as well, you know, like
you were trying to fucking quit there, but
no, it's fine. The thing with that is fucking, you know, I'm kind of laughing, but like deep down, I even feel a bit like there's like a little bit of sadness almost talking about some of these topics, you know.
They are sad. They're dark, they're sad. But these are the makings.
But ultimately, at the end of it, yes, sorry to interrupt you there, it's just a really important point for me that I really want to make, because I want to make sure that the listeners do walk away with this, you know, because we're kind of laughing about like the nihilism of it all and everything, you know.
Oh, we'll wait,
Here's, you know, this is the thing at the end of it, that there is, you know, I personally believe there is hope for people, but we need to understand the threats. We need to understand the situation that we're in first, and thus choose to live better and do better with the knowledge that we have in spite of it. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's my piece.
When people come on to podcasts and talk and go, well, what can we as a species learn about this, and how do we make things better? And I just always think to myself, well, you're never going to. You don't have that option. It's never going to be that thing. You can individually try and adapt. But the point is, like, the whatever AI is going to do, there's absolutely no way that the military isn't going to use it for this. That somebody's going to pull the brakes in one country, and China's going to go, yeah, fuck you. There is no way that we're going to be like, well, hold on, hang on a moment, and might let us all figure out some sort of holistic way of doing these things. That's just not human nature. And so when I hear these kind of politics or these podcasts trying to introduce, I suppose, a moment of, holistic caution, or a moment, what should we do? And you realize, hey, there's no fucking we. But I agree with you. All you can do is individually try and, adapt, or get yourself a drone army and get them, trained on a grid.
Yeah. As above, so below. As within, so without. That's the way.
Oh, all right, Chief. It's been a pleasure.
Alan, the pleasure is absolutely mine. Is there any plugs, anything you want to share with people? No?
No. I mean, look, Primordial is Primordial, and we're about to pass into the through the little aperture into the pastures of our dotage. It remains to be seen whether we become cult or classic. One is playing to 100 people in a basement. The other is just going, just becoming a classic band. No, I mean, look, it's the podcast still rolls on. I try and grab my head around these things here and there. If people want to follow me on Instagram, fair enough. But no, I mean, look, come on, let's just enjoy our avatar status and roll with that for a while,
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
All right,
man.
Chief.
There we go. You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. Alan, my man, appreciate the fuck out of you. Much respect. Let's do this again some other time, okay?
We will do.
And next time I'll talk to you about playing football with Phil in it. And and to everyone else listening to the podcast, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you on the next episode of Iblis Manifestations.
All right.
Take care.